Lavra Owen and Korky Paul. Winnie takes the plunge. Winnie's giant party. Who blooming gray, sang Winnie. It's the fancy dress party today. Winnie and Wilbur were taking a basket of food to the school ready for the party. They had pickle buns and sandwiches with real sand in them. We've all got to dress up, said Winnie. You can be Puss in Boots, Wilbur, and I'll be. But Winnie wasn't looking where she was going. Trip crash. Oi, said Winnie. What's that blooming leg, doing across the path? A muffled sound of deep sobbing came from the bushes beside the path. Sob. Jerry, said Winnie. Is that you? Sniff. Yes, Mrs., said Jerry. Winnie pushed through the bush. What in the whoopsie world is up with you, said Winnie. It's just sniff that there's a party. I know, said Winnie. Everyone's invited. Except me, said Jerry. Why's that, then, said Winnie. 'Cause I is a giant, said Jerry. Everybody's read giant stories in books, and now they think all giants is horrible. That's why I'm not invited. Rubbish bins, said Winnie. There are some lovely stories about giants. There's that nice one about Jack climbing up the beansprout where he meets a giant who, Well, there's that one about the shellfish giant who doesn't let the children, I do see what you mean, Jerry, said Winnie. But that's just blooming stories, not real life and people like us. Then how come nobody ever wants to play with me, said Jerry. Wilbur and I will, said Winnie. Come on, let's play hide and sneak. Go and hide, Jerry. I'll count to 100, then I'll come and find you. Goody, smiled Jerry, and off he went thump, thump, thump. Winnie began to count. 1 nitty-nat, 2 nitty-nat, 3 nitty-nat. Thump, thump, thump. Go quietly, shouted Winnie. I can hear where you are. 22 nitty-nat, 20 dash. Tiptoe crash. Tiptoe crack. 98 nitty-nat, 99 nitty-nat, 100. Shouted Winnie. Coming, ready steady or not. Winnie opened her eyes and saw Jerry's bottom sticking right out of the smelly berry bush, just at the same moment as a little girl saw it, and shriek! Where my me, shouted the little girl. Found you, Jerry, said Winnie. See, Mrs., said Jerry. See? I ain't no good at playing. And I frighten people. You've turned hide and sneak into hide and shriek, said Winnie. Let's try leapfrog instead. Thump bump, went Winnie as she tried to leap over Jerry but leapt into him instead. Splat, went Wilbur. Jerry was just too big for them to get over. Ooh, I'm as puffed as popcorn and as bruised as a boomerang banana, said Winnie. I give up. See, said Jerry. See? Yes, I do see, said Winnie. But don't you worry, Jerry. You shall go to the party. Wilbur found an idea in a book of photos. It showed a street party from the olden days. Perfect, said Winnie. Quick! I must phone Mrs. Palmer. Down on the high street, Winnie waved her wand. Abracadabra! Instantly there was a ring road to take all the cars away from the village. We need party decorations, said Winnie. She waved her wand. Abracadabra! And there were flowers. I'll just put them in pots, said Winnie. She jumped onto her broom and flew up onto the rooftops, stopping to poke flowers into all the chimney pots. As pretty as a pink cockroach, she said. Then Winnie flew around, scooping up washing lines from back gardens to drape them from the lamp posts. "Big bloomers bunting," she said. Down below, Mrs. Palmer was sorting the tables and chairs and food and drink. "Where can we put Jerry?" said Mrs. Palmer. "He'd break any of these ordinary chairs." "Leave it to me, Mrs. P," said Winnie. Abracadabra! Instantly there was a giant throne of a chair. And there was a hole in the ground so that Jerry's chair could be sunk down and be at the right height for him to use the same table as everyone else. "Well done, Winnie," said Mrs. Palmer. She laid Jerry a place with a dustbin lid plate and a bucket cup. "Here they all come," said Mrs. Palmer. "We'll have party games first, then tea." "Oh, but we're not dressed up, Winnie." "Easy peasy tight pants squeezy," said Winnie. She waved her wand. Abracadabra! "Don't Winnie and Mrs. Palmer look lovely?" Mrs. Palmer announced the first party game. "Hide and seek." "Dear, oh dear, Wilbur," said Winnie. "How's Jerry going to get on? Where is he, anyway?" Wilbur shrugged. The children hid here and there, and just about everywhere. Some of them chose to hide in a tree. They climbed up into its branches, then they sat and waited to be found. "I like it up here," said one child. "So do I," said another. "Did you know that Jerry the Giant is coming to the party?" The tree quivered. "Is he?" said a third child. "Oh, good. I like Jerry." "So do I," said both the other children. Then splash, "What's that?" said the first one. "It's raining inside this tree." But it wasn't rain. It was Jerry. Sniff, went the tree. "Jerry," said Winnie. "Is that you?" "It is, missus," said Jerry. "I is crying because I is so happy." "Jerry's costume wins the fancy dress competition," said Mrs. Palmer. "He's a wonderful tree. He gets a book for his prize." "Ooh, just a moment, Mrs. P," said Winnie when she saw the book in Mrs. Palmer's hand. She waved her wand. Abracadabra! Instantly the book changed. "Is it a book about giants?" asked Jerry, looking worried. "Yes, but nice giants," said Winnie. Oh, said Jerry, and he hugged the book hard. Jerry let the children climb all over him, and he swung them round. "Then, shall we play leapfrog?" said Winnie. "But," began Jerry. "Don't worry," said Winnie. She waved her wand. Abracadabra! And instantly all the children had froggy legs and froggy feet. They could leap over Jerry with no trouble at all. Leap! 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 But when it was Jerry's turn to leap over the children, they all collapsed. "Time for tea," said Mrs. Palmer. They ate and they talked. Then they filled the hole in the ground with water, and the children went swimming with their froggy legs, which made them swim extra fast. And guess what? When Jerry got home, he found an invitation stuck in his letter box. He'd been invited to the party all along, but just didn't know it. "You silly great lummox," said Winnie. "The abominable Winnie!" Winnie looked out of the window and squealed. "Yippee-de-pee, Wilbur! There's snow as deep as a maggoty mallow pie." Winnie went down to the kitchen and made a big blubbling bucket of gray splorage. She dolloped the splorage into mini cauldrons, then dribbled it with snail syrup. "Mmm," said Winnie. "Sniff! That smells truly abominable." "Meow?" asked Wilbur, licking syrup off his spoon. "D'you like that word abominable?" said Winnie. "I'm not completely absolutely sure what it means, but I have been told that my cooking is abominable." Lick! Slurp! Yum! So abominable must mean really, really, really nice, mustn't it? Meow. Wilbur shook his head and pointed towards a dictionary, but Winnie was looking out of the window. Let's go out and play. They put on hats and gloves and tail warmers and went out into the cold. Watch this, said Winnie. Splodge. She tipped herself over into the snow to make a witch-shaped print. It was a bit messy. Splat! Wilbur made a cat print that was crisp and clean. He added twigs for whiskers. I suppose yours is better, said Winnie. They made an ice slide and slid along it with their arms out to help them balance. Wee bump. Went Winnie. Wee. Went Wilbur, going much further. Huh, said Winnie, rubbing her bottom. Snowball fights are what I'm really, really abominably good at. Watch this. Winnie scooped up snow and squashed it into a ball. She threw the snowball at Wilbur. Splat. Splat on the cat, said Winnie. He. Plop. Wilbur threw one back, and soon they were having a snowball fight. Chuck. Went Winnie. Splat. Hit. Marrow. Throw. Went Wilbur. Duck. Went Winnie. Missed, shouted Winnie. Then Wilbur scooped a really big snowball and threw it plop. To land wetly and coldly right down Winnie's neck. Ugh, shouted Winnie. Oh, you meanie, Wilbur. That was horrible. Me he, laughed Wilbur. Stop it, said Winnie. Or I'm not playing with you anymore. But Wilbur threw another snowball that landed splat right in Winnie's face. Me he. Right, said Winnie. You're not my friend anymore, Wilbur the cat. Winnie stomped off to where the children were making snowmen. Can I help? Asked Winnie. She added this, and that, and those to make the snowman more special. Good, isn't it? Said Winnie. Look at that one, laughed the children. They were pointing to where Wilbur had made another snowman. It's a snow witch. Snow Winnie. Ha ha. Ha, said Winnie. I can make our snowman better than that one. Shall I? Yes, please, said the children. I'll make it into an abominable snowman, said Winnie. She waved her wand. Abracadabra. Oh, said the children. What's that? A lovely abominable snowman, that's what, said Winnie. A really nice big. It really is very, very big, isn't it? Gulp. Went the children. The abominable snowman was huge. It was hairy. And it was moving. It was taking great big footsteps towards them, and it didn't look friendly. Thump thump. Hello, nice Mr. Abominable, said Winnie. Thump thump. Heck in a hairnet, run, shouted Winnie. Winnie and the children began to run down the hill, but the abominable snowman was running even faster after them. Thump thump thump. He's going to catch us, said Winnie. Dive. Wilbur threw himself at the abominable snowman, trying to stop it. But the abominable snowman just tripped over Wilbur and began to roll down the hill, roly-poly faster and faster, turning itself into a giant snowball. Rumble roll. Abracadash. Began Winnie. But splat gulp. Winnie was rolled into the ball that was growing bigger and bigger as it picked up more snow. The abominable snowball began to pick up children too. Splat gulp. Splat gulp. Then, leave those children alone, you great bully, shouted Mrs. Palmer. She stepped into the path of the abominable snowman that had turned into an abominable snowball. She held up a hand. Stop, she commanded. But the abominable snowball scooped up Mrs. Palmer, too. Luckily the hill flattened out, so the abominable snowball rolled to a halt. There were arms, legs and head sticking out of it. Frosted fidgets, said Winnie. Where's my wand? Wilbur ran up and handed her the wand. She just managed to wave it. Abracadabra! Puff! The snowball gently exploded, spilling Winnie and children and Mrs. Palmer into the snow. The abominable snowman snowball was gone. Thanks Snow Goosey Ganders for that, said Winnie. She tried to stand up, but fell straight over because she was so dizzy from rolling. But she was smiling. I've just had a blooming brilliant idea, she said. Oh dear, said dizzy Mrs. Palmer. We should make a really big snowball, said Winnie. Absolutely not another one, said Mrs. Palmer. We've all had quite enough of big snowballs for one day. Not a snowball, Mrs. P., said Winnie. A snowball. You know, with dancing and posh frocks and bow ties and music and all that. But Mrs. Palmer was still shaking her head. We couldn't possibly organize a snowball by this evening. There isn't time to make food and buy dresses and... Just look over there, everybody, said Winnie. All the heads turned, and Winnie gave a quick whisk of her wand. Abracadabra! Wow! Instantly there was a sparkling snow dome made from the abominable snowball's snow. An igloo ballroom. And everyone was dressed for a ball. There was a band. And food. And balloons. Doobie-doo-wap-wap. The music started. Ahem, Mio. Wilbur, said Winnie. Oh, you look so dashing. And you were so brave, trying to save us from that abominable snowman. Meow, said Wilbur modestly. Oh, Wilbur, I'm sorry I was as moody as a moldy melon earlier, said Winnie. Please, can we be friends again? Meow, grinned Wilbur. He held up one front leg. Oh, yes. I'd love to dance with you, said Winnie. So Winnie and Wilbur and Mrs. Palmer and all the children danced as the night grew dark outside. They danced as the sun began to rise and warm the world, and the igloo ballroom began to drip. Everyone was hot from dancing. Abracadabra, said Winnie, and suddenly the snow of the ballroom turned into red and orange and green and purple ice lollies. Have a lick, said Winnie. Winnie licked green gherkin lolly while Wilbur munched on a golden kipper-flavored chunk. You know what, Wilbur, said Winnie. That was an abominable party. You're wrong, Winnie, said Mrs. Palmer. Abominable means terrible. Does it? Said Winnie. And that party was wonderful. So my abominable cooking is. Interesting, said Mrs. Palmer firmly. Goodbye. Winnie's mouse organ. Pong. Phew. Winnie and Wilbur were flying along with pegs on their noses because they'd got some lumps of the smelliest green hairy moldy cheese in their basket. This will tempt those blooming noisy mice out, said Winnie. I'll put it in the crocodile jaw trap, and it can snip-snap them up, and then tonight we can sleep. We won't be woken by their blooming scratching and squeaking ever again. Music in schools. Get enthused. Then, oh, look at that, Wilbur, said Winnie. There was a poster outside the school. Just look at that shiny snaily thingy. And a great big nappy pin. Whatever are they? Mrs. Palmer was coming out of the school. Sniff. What's that ghastly smell? She asked. Just cheese, said Winnie. Do you want to try some? No thank you, said Mrs. Palmer. Ah. I see that you're looking at our poster. We are hoping to enthuse the children with a love of music. Coo, said Winnie. I'm enthused already. I'd love to play one of those funny things. Well, said Mrs. Palmer. If you could play an instrument, you would be more than welcome at school this afternoon. So far we haven't been able to find a musician to come and play for us. Oh, I'll volunteer, Mrs. P., said Winnie. I'll show the little ordinaries how to make lovely music. Marrow! Wilbur dropped his head into his paws. Which instrument do you play? Asked Mrs. Palmer. Oh, said Winnie. It's, Well, you'll just have to wait and see, Mrs. P. But I'll be along later with my instrument, don't you worry. Well, thank you, said Mrs. Palmer. I'll tell the head teacher right away. Wowzow, said Winnie, as they flew home. Oh, lovely dovely brillaramaridles. I'm going to be a musician. Meo? Asked Wilbur. How? Said Winnie. Easy peasy turnip juice squeezy. I just need an instrument and then I'll play it. Back home, Winnie waved her wand. Abracadabra! And instantly, there at Winnie's feet was something that looked like a hairy beast with spikes. Hiss, went Wilbur. It's a bagpipe, said Winnie. Just you listen to this. Winnie blew down a pipe. Up plumped the hairy balloony bag. Then a terrible high-up wire came from the pipes. Hiss! Pounce! Pop! Why-ile. Oh, Wilbur, you've squashed it, said Winnie. What did you do that for? I'll have to try another instrument. Winnie held her wand end onto her lips. Abracadabra! In an instant, Winnie had a shiny trumpet in her hands. Lovely! I'll do a fanfare. Winnie blew. No noise came out. Wilbur smiled. He relaxed. Winnie scowled and blew a raspberry down the trumpet. Parp! Parp parp! Wilbur pulled a cushion over his head. Parp! Went Winnie. Marrow, wailed Wilbur. Oh, blooming heck, Wilbur! Perhaps I should try something quieter. Perhaps a stringy thingy instrument. Winnie waved her wand like a bow. Abracadabra! And there was a violin. Winnie lifted the violin to her chin, then she began to stroke the bow over the string screech. Marrow ow ow, screeched Wilbur even louder. You'll have to go outside, said Winnie. I can't learn an instrument with you making that kind of a racket. Out you go and leave me to perfectify my music playing in time for school. Winnie threw Wilbur out. Slam! She shut the door on him. Squeak tee-hee, laughed the mice who were peeping around corners. They'd been sniffing that cheese, but not daring to come out while Wilbur was there. Now. Squeak! Sniff sniff! Scuttle soodle! Out came mice from every corner and crevice of the house. Go away, said Winnie as one scuttled over her foot. Get off! Winnie kicked. Squeak, went the mouse. Oh, said Winnie. That was a nice little sound. She gently poked another mouse with her wand. Squeak! What a lovely low squeak, she said. I've just had a blooming good idea. Winnie tiptoed to the door and quietly opened it. Creak! Wilbur, she whispered. Come back inside and catch some mice for me, but don't hurt them. In came Wilbur. Soon he got 8 different-sized mice and put them in a box. Right, said Winnie. Time to go off to the school. In the school hall, all the little ordinaries sat nice and quiet, waiting to see what Winnie had in her box. So did the teachers. So did Mrs. Palmer. Up went one small hand. What kind of an instrument is it? It's a mouse organ, said Winnie. Shall I show you? Yes, please, shouted all the little ordinaries. So Winnie opened the box. She tipped out the mice. The mice looked a bit shy. Winnie put them in size order, then she gave one a gentle prod with her finger. Squeak, went the mouse. Giggle, went the children. Winnie poked another. Squeak, and another. Squeak. Is that it? Asked Mrs. Palmer. Just mice squeaking? Air, said Winnie. But Wilbur was handing her wand. Oh, no, said Mrs. Palmer, holding up a hand. Absolutely no magic in front of the children. I was only going to conduct the mice with my baton, said Winnie. Oh, very well, then, said Mrs. Palmer. Winnie raised her wand. She pretended to cough, but she was actually cough-whispering abracadabra. And instantly, we are 8 little mice squeak squeak, who live in Winnie's house squeak squeak, and sing very nice. In winter when it's cold, if we're feeling bold, we'll slide down the icicles. Squeak squeak. In summer when it's hot, we really like a lot to ride on our bicycles. Squeak squeak. The children laughed and clapped, and they were soon singing and squeaking along too. The teachers were delighted. Phew, in a shrew stew, said Winnie to Wilbur as they left the school. And nobody noticed the magic, did they? Back home, they opened up the box of mice, and now, instead of Winnie feeling cross with the mice and Wilbur feeling greedy for the mice, they felt all soppy about the mice. Shall we all share some cheese? Said Winnie. Meow, nodded Wilbur. So the mice joined them for a pawnee cheese party before they all settled into bed. Sweet cheesy dreams, everyone, yawned Winnie. Then they all lay awake all night. Winnie takes the plunge, gurgle, went Winnie's loo. Gurgle wurgle. Winnie pulled the handle again, but it wouldn't flush. It just went belch burp. Oh, leaping loo rolls, said Winnie. There's something wrong with this blooming loo, and I don't know what to do about it. Meow, suggested Wilbur, waving a plunger. It's worth a try, agreed Winnie. Splish splosh. Squirt. Squelch. Went the plunger. Winnie pulled the handle again. Burp. Went the loo. There's something down there, said Winnie. Something getting in the way. She leant over the loo, peering deep down into the bowl. Pull the handle, Wilbur, and I'll see if I can see what's blocking it. Yank. Went Wilbur on the handle. And flush swoosh. Went the loo. Ah, went Winnie as she was flushed down the pan. Row. Wilbur tried to hold onto Winnie's legs. But the pent-up flush was so fierce it swept Winnie down and away. Meow, cried Wilbur. Meow, meow. But the loo was empty. Winnie was gone. Meow, wailed Wilbur in a voice he hadn't used since he was a kitten. Down the pipes Winnie was whizzing whoops. Whoops, just as if she was going down a flume at the swimming pool. Except this pipe was dark. This pipe was smelly. This pipe went on and on. Gasp! Went Winnie, coming up for air but still swishing along. What the blooming! Something slimy and wiggly was swimming along with her. Who in the loo are you? Are you the loo-blocking critter? Said Winnie. She gave the critter a good poke with her wand as she struggled on down the pipe. Winnie was running out of energy for swimming. Help! Thought Winnie. Splashing and gurgling, she just about managed to wave her wand. If you've tried waving anything underwater, you'll know that it isn't as easy as it is in the air. But Winnie pushed her wand in a slow swish. Abracadabra! And instantly Winnie's legs were transformed into a mermaid tail. She waggled her tail, and shot swam through the water. Whee! Said Winnie. And splush! Out she squirted from the pipe into clear cold salty water that glittered brightly in the sunshine. Wiggle waggle went Winnie's tail, pushing her upwards towards air and light and... Where the blooming heck am I? Said soggy Winnie. You, my dear, are in Merland, said a deep voice. And there in the water beside Winnie was a handsome merman, flipping his handsome tail. Oh, said Winnie. Could you tell me which direction is home, please? Certainly. You will come home with me, my dear, said the merman. You can be my mare wife. And he placed a string of pearls around Winnie's neck. Oh, no. No, thank you, said Winnie. But I am strong and brave. You must marry me. The merman took hold of Winnie's arm. Winnie bopped the merman on the head with her wand, but he snatched it from her. Let go, you blooming bully, said Winnie. Anyway, I bet you're not as brave as my Wilbur is. He'll be here soon. Wilbur? Said the merman. Is Wilbur your big brother? No. He's my cat, said Winnie. He'll be coming to rescue me, I'm sure. Look! I think that's him now. Now, if there's one thing fishy people are scared of, it's cats. I'm off, said the merman, and away he dived. A small dot on the horizon was getting bigger as it got closer. Wilbur, shouted Winnie. Wilbur was on an old plank, trying to paddle with a wooden spoon. Oh, Wilbur, you're as brave as 20 mermen. Take me home, Wilbur. Winnie powered the raft through the water with her wonderful tail. This tail is Brillaramaritals for swimming, said Winnie. But when we get home I'm going to need to magic my legs back. But just then... Whoops! Winnie was caught up in a fisherman's net and hauled aboard his boat. Marrow, protested Wilbur. Oi, shouted Winnie. But the fisherman had his eye caught on and didn't hear a thing. When they reached the harbor, Winnie was thrown into a van with the other fish. Wilbur clung to the back as they drove to the fish shop. But he couldn't stop Winnie from being dumped onto the counter. Meow, said Wilbur, as Winnie floundered with the flounders and the chip shop man beat up his batter. Me-oh! Throw some fish heads to that noisy cat, said the fish and chip shop man. Wilbur kept banging on the window and pointing, but I'm not giving you that big crossfish, if that's what you're after, laughed the fish and chip shop man. The man peeled the potatoes to make chips, and he lit the stove. It wouldn't be long before he began cooking the fish. So, as fast as a blast, Wilbur ran to Jerry's house. There he told Scruff. Meow meow meow. Ruff woof, agreed Scruff. Then Scruff told Jerry, so Jerry came running, with Scruff and Wilbur trying to keep up, all the way back to the fish and chip shop. Jerry stomped into the fish shop. I wants a giant-sized fish and chips, please. Giant-sized, said the fish and chip shop man. Aha! We do have an exceptionally large fish in the catch today. I'll just pop it into the fryer. No! Marrow! Woof! Air! I likes my fish raw, said Jerry. Really? Said the fish and chip shop man. Well, that saves me a job. He piled a mountain of chips onto a huge bit of paper, then he plumped Winnie on top of the chips. Thanks, said Jerry. His fish and chip parcel was wriggling and saying rude things. So he sat on some grass and unwrapped his supper. His fish had her hands on her hips. Why didn't you stop him from showering me in blooming salt and vinegar? Asked Winnie. I feel as sour and as salty as a pickled bunion. But Winnie soon cheered up, scoffing chips. And Wilbur ran home to fetch a spare wand. Winnie waved it. Abracadabra! And instantly her legs were back. Ooh, that's blooming better, said Winnie. Legs are useful. They walked home as the sun set. Teal mend your loo, if you like, offered Jerry. Ooh, would you? Said Winnie. So Jerry brought his mallet, and smash, that was the end of the problem loo. But now we haven't got any loo, said Winnie. Heck, where's that wand? Abracadabra! And there was a pair of loos. His and hers. Winnie and Wilbur pulled down a handle each. Flush! Flush! No problem. Who blooming Ray, said Winnie.